My brother, Daniel, was 32 when his marriage started to unravel. From the outside, people thought he had it all figured out: steady job, nice apartment, a wife who seemed committed. But what no one saw was how fast things changed when Emily, his wife, told him she wanted a break. She didn't leave. She stayed in his apartment, slept in his bed, ate his food, and told everyone they weren't together anymore. She wanted freedom without cost, space without sacrifice. Daniel didn't fight her. He didn't beg. Instead, he smiled and said one word: perfect. The next morning, a roommate agreement appeared on the kitchen table. Emily laughed at it, thought it was a joke, and signed without reading. That was her mistake. Because 2 weeks later, the bills came: rent, utilities, groceries, even cleaning fees. Every charge carried her name, backed by her signature. She had asked for independence. What she got was accountability. And as you'll see, Daniel didn't need to raise his voice or slam a door. All he had to do was let her live with a choice she thought was harmless. This is how my brother turned silence into strategy, and how Emily's laughter turned into her biggest regret. The words left her mouth as if she'd been rehearsing them. I think we need a break. I sat at the kitchen table, a fork halfway to my lips, staring at her across the plates of takeout we'd ordered the night before. The food had gone cold, and suddenly the air in the room felt heavy. My wife, Emily, leaned against the counter with her arms crossed, her eyes darting anywhere but at me. A break. The first thought that came to me was simple: space. Maybe she'd pack a bag, spend a week with her sister, clear her head. Instead, she walked down the hall, tossed her bag on our bed, and pulled out her phone. That was it. No suitcase. No boxes. No announcement that she was leaving. I didn't press her. Not yet. That night, she still crawled under my covers, scrolling on her phone, laughing at whatever she was reading while her head rested on my pillow. I listened to her typing messages and watched her smile at texts I couldn't see. Then she rolled over, said good night, and shut her eyes like nothing had changed. She wanted a break, but she didn't want to leave. The irony wasn't lost on me. She still showered in my bathroom, ate the groceries I bought, used the electricity I paid for. She lounged on my couch, watched my television, ordered delivery on my credit card. And when friends called, she told them we were on a break, as if that gave her the right to rewrite the rules while keeping the perks. I could have confronted her. I could have demanded she pack her things. But I didn't. Instead, I said one word, low and steady, making sure she heard it as clearly as I meant it. Perfect. The next morning, she walked into the kitchen bleary-eyed, hair a mess, clutching a mug of coffee. On the table between us lay a neatly printed stack of papers, stapled in the corner. Her name, in bold letters, sat at the top of the page. Roommate agreement. She squinted at it, set down her mug, and picked it up. You're kidding. She laughed, the sound bouncing off the walls, full of amusement at what she thought was a joke. Really? A roommate agreement? What is this, a sitcom? She flipped through the pages without reading, chuckling at the sections labeled shared spaces and financial obligations. I didn't react. I just sat across from her, sipping my coffee, expression flat. You're insane, she said between giggles, pulling a pen from the counter and scrawling her signature on the last page.
Fine. There.
Happy. She slid the paper back to me, grinning like she'd outsmarted me somehow. I only nodded, folded the papers neatly, and tucked them into a folder. She thought it was a game. 2 weeks later, the mail arrived. A thick envelope addressed to her sat on the table. She tore it open casually, expecting junk or maybe a magazine. Instead, her eyes widened as she pulled out a detailed invoice, columns of charges, each one neatly itemized.
Rent.
Utilities. Groceries. Internet. Cleaning services. Her total sat at the bottom of the page, bold and undeniable. Her laugh broke instantly. What the hell is this? She demanded, waving the papers in my face. I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever. It's the first month's bill. Your share. We signed an agreement, remember? You can't be serious. Dead serious. Her face reddened as she flipped through the pages, realizing each charge had receipts attached. I had transferred my finances into a separate account. The grocery deliveries were no longer on my card. They were under her name. The utilities? Split exactly 50-50, with her signature authorizing it. Even the cleaning fee was itemized, linked back to her approval in the contract she'd laughed at. She stopped herself, shaking her head. This isn't legal. I slid the agreement across the table, tapping the line where she had signed. It's binding. And you signed it without reading. The silence in the apartment didn't sound like peace. It sounded like pressure. Emily sat at the edge of the couch with the first bill still in her hands, scanning it again and again as if the numbers might change. Her shoulders tensed, her mouth pressed into a thin line. She looked smaller than usual, and for the first time since she had declared her break, she didn't look so certain of herself. When the second envelope arrived a week later, her mood dropped lower. This one wasn't just rent and groceries. It included the internet bill, a trash collection fee, and her share of a service that had cleaned the carpets earlier that month. Each item was clearly logged, each receipt attached with her name beside mine. You really set this up, she said one night, her voice flat. I did, I replied, keeping my tone even. You're treating me like some stranger. I'm your wife. You're the one who wanted a break. I reminded her. This is what it looks like. She didn't have a response. Instead, she shoved the papers into her bag and stormed into the bedroom, leaving me alone in the living room with the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the air. By the end of that week, she stopped laughing altogether. Her phone calls grew shorter, her messages clipped. She avoided FaceTiming her friends in the apartment now, probably worried I'd overhear something. She no longer looked comfortable lounging around as she had before. Instead, she stayed tense, her eyes darting toward me whenever I moved through the room. The first payment deadline came. She stalled, tried to push it off, claiming she didn't have access to funds right then. I didn't press her. I let her sweat while I cooked my meals, set aside my receipts, and logged everything neatly in a folder. 2 days later, she realized I had locked down my bank accounts. She couldn't access my credit cards, and she didn't have passwords for the accounts we once shared. Her face drained of color when she tried to pay for takeout, and the screen flashed declined. You froze everything? She asked, standing in the kitchen doorway with her phone in her hand. I separated everything. I corrected calmly. That's what happens when roommates share costs. We keep things separate. The following day, her sister showed up unannounced. Kelly had always been quick to take Emily's side in arguments, but the moment she stepped into the apartment and saw the stack of invoices on the counter, her expression shifted. You're actually making her pay? Kelly asked me, holding up one of the papers. She signed, I said simply. Emily jumped in before I could say more. He's doing this to punish me. I shook my head. No, I'm just giving you what you asked for. You said you didn't want to be my wife right now. Fine. You're my roommate. Roommates pay bills. Kelly's jaw tightened. She looked at Emily, then back at me. This is extreme. Extreme would be kicking her out, I said. I didn't do that. I gave her the choice to stay, and she agreed to terms. Emily's face twisted in frustration, but she didn't argue in front of her sister. Instead, she sat back, silent and tense, while Kelly pulled me aside near the door. She's not in a good place, Kelly whispered, lowering her voice. Can't you just let this go until she figures out what she wants? She already made her choice, I said. Now she's living with it. Kelly studied me for a moment, realizing she wouldn't change my mind, and finally left with a heavy sigh. Emily slammed the bedroom door the second it clicked shut. Days passed and the tension grew. Emily started skipping meals, maybe out of pride or maybe because she didn't want to admit she couldn't afford groceries anymore. She went to work, came home late, and collapsed into bed without speaking. On nights she stayed up, I could hear her whispering on the phone, probably searching for sympathy from friends, maybe even plotting her next move. But no one was rushing to rescue her. Not when the contract had her signature on it. When the third envelope came, she didn't open it right away. It sat on the counter, like a weight she couldn't lift. By then, Her first balance was already overdue, and penalties had begun stacking. She finally tore the envelope open late one night, her hands trembling as she read the total. "This is too much," she muttered, her voice breaking. "It's your share?" I answered, keeping my tone steady. "You're bleeding me dry." "No," I said. "I'm holding you accountable." She pushed back from the table and glared at me, eyes blazing. "Why are you doing this? Do you hate me that much?" I held her stare, unflinching. "I don't hate you, but you wanted freedom without consequence. That's not how the world works." Her chest rose and fell, and for a moment I thought she might throw something. Instead, she turned away, retreating to the bedroom again. The next morning, she didn't go to work. Instead, she sat at the table with her laptop, her eyes red from lack of sleep. I could see the open tabs, loan calculators, budgeting spreadsheets, even a search for affordable apartments. She was cornered, and she knew it. By the end of that week, her mother called me. The conversation was short. She asked why her daughter was being billed like a tenant. I explained the agreement and sent her a scanned copy of Emily's signed contract. The line went quiet, and then her mother's tone shifted, sharp, not toward me, but toward Emily. "You signed this?" she asked her daughter, loud enough for me to hear from across the room. Emily didn't answer. Her mother's disappointment cut deeper than anything I had said. For the first time, Emily looked shaken not by me, but by someone else seeing the situation for what it really was. That weekend, she tried a new tactic. She cooked dinner, something she hadn't done in months, setting the table like we used to. She poured me a glass of water and sat across from me, trying to smile. "Can't we just stop this?" she asked softly. "Can't we go back to normal?" I set down my fork. "Normal would mean being my wife again. You made it clear you didn't want that." Her smile faltered. "I didn't mean like this." "But this is what you asked for," I said. "You can't have both." Her face fell, and for once, she didn't argue. The bills kept coming. The tension kept rising. And as her friends stopped answering late-night calls and her family refused to cover her debts, Emily was left with only one option: to face the truth she had been avoiding. She wanted out of the marriage, without losing the comfort it gave her. But now comfort had a price. By the third month, the cracks had widened into canyons. Emily could no longer hide the strain. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, her once carefully styled hair now often tied in a loose knot, clothes wrinkled from neglect. She wasn't the woman who strutted around declaring independence anymore. She was cornered, and every attempt to claw her way out left her weaker than before. The overdue balances grew thicker with each envelope. Rent, electricity, groceries, maintenance, internet, every detail documented with her name attached. Late fees piled on top of existing charges, swelling into numbers that left her pale whenever she read them. Her friends had stopped visiting. At first, they entertained her version of the story, telling her I was overreacting, promising support. But once they saw the contract and realized she had laughed her way into binding terms, their sympathy dried up. They didn't want to get dragged into debts that weren't theirs. Calls became shorter, texts went unanswered. Eventually, her phone lay silent on the coffee table most nights. Her family, too, had run out of patience. Her mother refused to cover her mistakes, pointing out bluntly during one heated phone call that she had signed the agreement and needed to take responsibility. Her father, quieter but sharper, told her she had chosen pride over honesty. Even her sister Kelly, once her shield, pulled away, tired of defending choices that collapsed under scrutiny. The isolation tightened around her like a noose. One evening, after another letter arrived, Emily slammed the envelope onto the table, her hands trembling. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice cracking. "You don't have to," I answered calmly. She looked at me, startled by the ease in my tone. "What do you mean?" "There are two paths," I explained. "You keep living here as a roommate with all the bills and rules that come with it. Or you walk away completely. The contract allows for termination if you vacate. You chose this arrangement. You can choose to end it too." Her eyes searched mine, desperate, almost pleading. And what about us? That depends on you, I said. You wanted a break. You wanted the comfort without the commitment. But life doesn't work like that. Marriage isn't a halfway house. Her lips trembled, and for a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she dropped her gaze to the table. The next morning she packed. This time it wasn't a bluff. Suitcases dragged across the floor, drawers emptied into bags, hangers stripped bare. She didn't speak much while she moved, but her silence said more than words could. It wasn't anger anymore. It was resignation. When the last box sat by the door, she finally turned toward me. Her expression was softer than it had been in months, stripped of the arrogance and mockery that had fueled her earlier choices. I thought I knew what I wanted, she admitted. I thought space would make things clearer. But all it did was show me how much I took for granted. I didn't answer right away. I let her words hang in the air, measured and fragile. Then I said, clarity comes with cost. You found that out. She nodded faintly, accepting it.
No arguments this time.
No laughter. She wheeled her suitcase out, the door closing softly behind her. The apartment fell quiet, but it wasn't the tense silence of the past few months. It was clean, final, like the echo of something finished. In the weeks that followed, the invoices stopped. My finances remained separate, steady, untouched by her chaos. The apartment, once filled with constant conflict, felt lighter. I moved through it with ease, every corner free of the weight she had carried in with her demands. Friends who had watched the storm unfold reached out, curious about the aftermath. I kept my answers simple. She wanted freedom. She got it. That was all that needed to be said. Emily never came back. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she had moved into a small apartment across town, struggling with expenses she once ignored. She picked up extra shifts at work, cut back on luxuries, and learned what it meant to stand on her own. I didn't chase her. I didn't gloat. I simply lived my life, steady and unbothered, because the battle had ended the moment she walked out with her bags. What began with one word, perfect, ended with her signature on an agreement she thought was a joke. The joke had turned on her. The laughter had died. And the lesson, carved into every overdue bill, was one she couldn't escape. Freedom comes with a price. And this time she paid it in full.